The massive ship hung in space like a silver mountain. Sophie Blake pressed her face against the shuttle window, her eyes wide with wonder. She had never seen anything so beautiful. The ship was 10 times bigger than any human vessel, covered in strange symbols that glowed with soft blue light. Her father sat beside her, adjusting his formal ambassador uniform. Peter Blake had been preparing for this meeting for 6 months. First contact with an alien civilization was the most important moment in human history. He glanced at his daughter and smiled nervously. "Remember what we talked about, Sophie. Be polite, don't touch anything without asking. And please try not to ask too many questions." Sophie nodded, but her mind was already racing with curiosity. She was 10 years old, small for her age, with brown hair tied back in a ponytail and green eyes that noticed everything. She clutched her tablet computer against her chest, ready to take notes about everything she saw. The Crethian Empire had sent the invitation 3 weeks ago. They wanted to meet with human representatives on their flagship, the Valor's Edge. The message had been formal and somewhat cold. They made it clear they considered humans to be newcomers to space travel, primitive compared to their ancient civilization. But they had specifically requested that Ambassador Blake bring his daughter. The Crethians had explained that they wanted to understand human children, believing that young humans would show them the true nature of humanity better than trained diplomats. Peter had been uncomfortable with the request, but Sophie had begged to go. She loved science fiction stories and had dreamed about meeting aliens her whole life. The shuttle docked with a soft bump. The airlock door opened with a hiss and Sophie grabbed her father's hand. They stepped through into a corridor that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of some kind of dark metal that reflected their faces like black mirrors. Lights ran along the ceiling in patterns Sophie didn't understand. A group of aliens waited for them. Sophie had seen pictures, but seeing them in person was different. The Crethians stood about 7 feet tall with gray skin that looked like stone. They had 4 arms, 2 on each side of their torso, and their heads were wider than human heads with large golden eyes that had no pupils. They wore uniforms of deep red with silver markings. The leader stepped forward. His voice came from a translator device on his chest, turning his language into English that sounded mechanical and strange. "Ambassador Blake, welcome to the Valor's Edge. I am Commander Vexthor, assigned to be your host during this visit." Peter shook the commander's hand, or rather one of his 4 hands. Sophie noticed that the Crethian's skin felt warm and rough, like touching a heated stone. "This is my daughter, Sophie," Peter said. Vexthor looked down at Sophie. His golden eyes studied her for a long moment. Sophie looked right back at him, unafraid. She had read that showing fear was considered rude in Crethian culture. "A human child," Vexthor said slowly. "You are very small. How many years have you lived?" 10, Sophie answered. "How old are you?" Vexthor made a sound that might have been laughter. "I have lived for 90 of your years. Come, I will show you our ship while your father meets with the High Commander." Peter hesitated, but Sophie squeezed his hand. "I'll be okay, Dad. Commander Vexthor will take care of me." They walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. Vexthor explained that the Valor's Edge was home to 5,000 crew members from 4 different species. The Crethian Empire was actually an alliance of 4 civilizations that had united over 2,000 years ago. Sophie asked questions about everything. What did the different colored lights mean? How fast could the ship go? What did the crew eat? Vexthor answered patiently at first, but after an hour of constant questions, he seemed tired. They entered a large room filled with display screens. Crew members worked at stations, monitoring information that flowed across the screens in alien writing. Sophie recognized it as some kind of control center. "This is our tactical operations room," Vexthor explained. "From here we coordinate all military operations in this sector of space." Sophie's eyes lit up. She loved strategy games and military history. Her grandfather had been in the army and had taught her to play chess when she was 5. She had been reading books about famous battles ever since. "You have battles here in space?" she asked. "Sometimes," Vexthor said, "though the Crethian Empire has brought peace to most of this region. We have not fought a major war in over 300 years. We are a civilization of order and harmony." A younger officer approached Vexthor and spoke in their own language. The translator on Vexthor's chest didn't convert it, so Sophie couldn't understand. But she noticed the younger officer kept glancing at her with curiosity. Vexthor made a decision. "Officer Kelvon wants to know about human children. Perhaps you would like to stay here while I attend to some duties? Kelvan can watch you and answer your questions. Sophie nodded eagerly. Her father had told her to be cooperative. Kelvin was smaller than Vexthor, with lighter gray skin. He seemed nervous around her. I have never met a human before, Kelvin admitted. Are all human children as curious as you? I think I'm more curious than most, Sophie said honestly. My teachers say I ask too many questions. More officers gathered around as word spread that the human child was in the tactical room. They studied her like she was an interesting specimen. Sophie didn't mind. She studied them back, noting how they moved, how they communicated with hand gestures and sounds that the translator didn't pick up. One officer, who introduced herself as Tactical Officer Nixara, seemed friendlier than the others. She had darker skin with patterns that looked like circuits running across her face. Would you like to see something interesting? Nixara asked. We have holographic displays of famous battles. Many of our young ones enjoy studying them. Yes, please. Sophie sat down at a console and Nixara began to operate controls. A three-dimensional image appeared in the air above them, showing dozens of ships arranged in specific formations. This is the Battle of the Crimson Nebula, Nixara explained. It happened 150 years ago. A group of rebels tried to break away from the Empire. Our fleet defeated them using traditional formations that have been used for over 1,000 years. Sophie watched as the holographic battle played out. The Crithian ships formed a large semicircle like a curved wall. The rebel ships charged forward, and the Crithian formation wrapped around them like hands closing. The battle ended with the rebels trapped and forced to surrender. Other officers had gathered to watch. They seemed proud of the display, expecting Sophie to be impressed by their military might. Sophie tilted her head, studying the display.
Can you play it again?
She asked. Nixara replayed the battle. Sophie watched more carefully this time, her mind working through what she was seeing. She had studied naval battles from Earth's history, and this reminded her of some of them, but there were differences. Space wasn't like the ocean. Ships could move in 3 dimensions here. That was a good victory, Sophie said slowly. But I have a question. The officers seemed pleased that she was showing interest. Vexthor had returned and stood at the back of the group. What is your question, child? Nixara asked. Sophie pointed at the holographic display. The rebels came from this direction, right? And your ship surrounded them here. But there was this big nebula behind you and those asteroid fields on both sides. Why didn't the rebels go around? The nebula looks like it has lots of hiding places. The room became very quiet. The officers looked at each other. Nixara's expression changed from friendly to uncertain. The rebels were not intelligent enough to think of such tactics, one officer said dismissively. They charged forward because they were emotional and angry. Sophie nodded, but she pulled out her tablet and started sketching. But if I was the rebel commander, I would send small groups of ships into the nebula here and here and here. Then I would make it look like I was charging forward. But really I would just be keeping your attention. My real attack would come from inside the nebula, hitting your supply ships that were back here. She held up her tablet, showing a simple diagram. The officers leaned in to look. Several of them began speaking rapidly in their own language. Vexthor stepped forward. That is an interesting idea, but it would not work. Our formations have been perfected over centuries. Oh, Sophie said, putting her tablet away. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be rude. I just like thinking about strategy. My grandpa taught me. But the officers were now talking among themselves, pulling up data and running calculations. Sophie heard words like supply line vulnerability and sensor limitations and dense nebula come through the translator. Kelvan looked at Sophie with new interest. Your grandfather taught you about military tactics? Is he a human warrior? He was a soldier, Sophie explained. But now he's retired. He teaches history at a university. He says the best way to learn about any civilization is to study how they fight their wars. Nixara turned back to Sophie. Would you like to see another famous battle? Sophie's face lit up. Yes, please. For the next 2 hours, the officers showed Sophie battle after battle from Crithian history. Each time, after watching carefully, Sophie would ask simple questions that made the officers uncomfortable. Why didn't they? The next morning, Sophie woke up excited. She had dreamed about the holographic battles all night. Her father was already awake, reading reports on his tablet at the small table in their quarters. Dad, can I go back to the tactical room today? Sophie asked while putting on her clothes. Peter looked up from his reading. Sophie, the officers told me you were asking a lot of questions yesterday. Good questions, apparently. Too good. Did I do something wrong? Sophie felt worried. She had tried to be polite. No, sweetheart. You were perfect. But you made them think about things they hadn't considered before. Commander Vexthor wants you to spend more time with them today. They want to understand how you learned what you know. Sophie smiled with relief. Grandpa taught me most of it. And I read a lot of history books. Can we call Grandpa and tell him about the aliens? Not yet. The communication delay is too long, but we'll tell him everything when we get home. After breakfast, Vexthor came to escort Sophie to the tactical room. This time he seemed different, more serious. He studied her as they walked like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Sophie, may I ask you something? Vexthor said. Sure. Yesterday you made observations about our battles. Where did you learn to think about military tactics? Sophie thought about how to explain. My grandpa was a soldier on Earth. He fought in a war when he was young. After he retired, he became a teacher. He taught me that war is like a big game of chess, except the pieces are real people, and the board keeps changing. He said every battle in history can teach you something. How many battles has your grandfather taught you about? I don't know, a lot. Maybe 100. And I read books on my own. My favorite period is World War II. That was a really big war on Earth about 80 years ago. Almost every country was fighting. Millions of soldiers, thousands of battles, ships, planes, tanks, submarines. The tactics kept changing because the technology kept getting better. Vexthor stopped walking. He looked down at Sophie with his golden eyes. Millions of soldiers? Thousands of battles? All in one war? Yes, the war lasted 6 years. Some people think World War I was more interesting, though. That was about 30 years before World War II. And then there were the ancient wars. The Roman Empire had lots of good battles. And the Mongols. And the Chinese had wars that lasted for hundreds of years with millions of people involved. Wait, Vexthor said slowly. How many wars has your planet had? Sophie shrugged. Nobody knows exactly. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We have records going back about 5,000 years. And there were wars happening somewhere pretty much all the time. My history teacher said that in all of human history, there have only been a few hundred years total when there wasn't a war happening somewhere on Earth. Vexthor said nothing for a long moment. He seemed to be processing this information. Sophie wondered if she had said something wrong again. When they reached the tactical room, more officers were waiting than yesterday. The room felt different, more tense. High Commander Zarketh was there, a tall Crithian with darker skin and more medals on his uniform than Vexthor. This is the human child? Zarketh's voice through the translator was deeper than Vexthor's. Yes, High Commander. This is Sophie Blake. Zarketh approached Sophie and knelt down so they were at eye level. Child? Commander Vexthor tells me you have been studying our military history. He says you have interesting ideas. I hope I wasn't rude, Sophie said. I just like learning about battles. Not rude, insightful. Today I want to show you something special. Our greatest victory, the Siege of Terminus Station. This battle is studied in every military academy in the Crithian Empire. It is the perfect example of patient strategy and superior planning. A new holographic display appeared, much larger than yesterday's. Sophie saw a massive space station surrounded by defensive platforms and hundreds of ships. Then a Crithian fleet arrived and took positions around the station. The rebellion had taken control of Terminus Station, Zarketh explained. It was their main base, heavily fortified with enough supplies to last for years. We could not assault it directly. Too many defenses. So we laid siege. For 18 months we surrounded the station, cutting off all supply lines, waiting for them to run out of food and power. Eventually they surrendered without us losing a single ship. Sophie watched the holographic display carefully. The Crithian fleet formed a perfect sphere around the station, maintaining their positions for what the display showed as 18 months. Nothing much happened. The fleet just waited while the station slowly ran out of supplies. That was very patient, Sophie said. 18 months is a long time. Zarketh seemed pleased. Yes, patience is the mark of a superior military mind. The rebels wanted us to attack so they could use their defenses. We refused to give them what they wanted. Can I ask some questions? Sophie pulled out her tablet. Of course. The station had lots of supplies, right? Food, water, power, ammunition? Yes, they had prepared for a long siege. And your fleet just stayed in position all around the station, blocking everything? Correct. Nothing could get in or out. Sophie started sketching on her tablet. Did you attack any of the defensive platforms? No, that would have cost us ships. We simply waited. Did you try to jam their communications? No, we allowed them to communicate. We wanted them to know how hopeless their situation was. Did you send in any troops to fight inside the station? No, that would have been too costly. We waited for starvation to do the work for us. Sophie looked at her tablet, then at the holographic display, then back at her tablet. The officers watched her, waiting to see what she would say. Hi, Commander, can I show you something? Yes. Sophie brought her tablet over to the holographic controls. Nixara helped her connect it. Sophie's sketch appeared in the holographic display overlaid on the station. If I was attacking this station, I wouldn't wait 18 months, Sophie said. First, I would jam all their communications so they can't talk to each other. That makes them scared and confused. Then I would send ships to attack just one defensive platform, here on the north side. I would use lots of missiles and make a really big attack. That would cost you ships, Zarketh said. Yes, but only a few. Because I'm not really trying to destroy the platform. I'm trying to make all the defenders move to the north side to protect it. See, while they're all looking north and fighting my ships there, I send small teams of soldiers to the south side. They break in here and here and here. Sophie pointed to 3 locations on the station. These look like power generators. If soldiers put bombs on them and blow them up, the whole station loses power. No lights, no heat, no life support. Then I give them 1 hour to surrender. If they don't, I blow up 1 more generator every hour until they do. She looked up at the High Commander. I think it would take maybe 6 days instead of 18 months. Maybe faster. The room was completely silent. Every officer was staring at the holographic display and Sophie's sketch. Zarketh stood up slowly and walked around the display, studying it from every angle. Run a simulation, he ordered. Use the exact conditions of the historical siege, but implement the child's strategy. An officer began working at a console. Everyone watched as the simulation ran. It showed exactly what Sophie had described. A diversionary attack on the north side, while small teams infiltrated the south. Power generators exploding. The station going dark. The siege ending in 6 days. The simulation concluded with a surrender. The computer calculated losses. 43 Krithian fighters destroyed in the diversionary attack, but the siege was over in less than a week instead of 18 months. Zarketh turned to Sophie. Where did you learn this strategy? Different places, Sophie said. The part about attacking from 2 sides at once is from old Earth battles like Hannibal at Cannae. The communication jamming is from submarine warfare in World War II. The infiltration part is from special forces operations. And blowing up the power generators is just common sense. If you're trapped in a building, you need power to survive. Who is Hannibal? Who are these special forces? Kelvon asked. Sophie's face lit up. She loved talking about history. Hannibal was a general from Carthage about 2,000 years ago on Earth. He fought against the Roman Empire. At the Battle of Cannae, he let the Romans think they were winning in the center of his army, but really he was surrounding them on both sides. He killed maybe 50,000 Roman soldiers in one day. It's one of the most famous battles in Earth history. 50,000 in one day? Nixara sounded shocked. Yes, ancient battles were really bloody, not like space battles. When you fight on the ground with swords and spears, lots of people die. And special forces are small groups of soldiers who train for years to do secret missions. They sneak into enemy territory, blow up important targets, rescue prisoners, gather intelligence. Every country on Earth has special forces teams. Sophie pulled up information on her tablet. See, here's some history books I brought with me. This one is about World War II. This one is about ancient Rome. This one is about naval warfare. And this one is about the Mongol invasions of Asia. She handed the tablet to Zarketh. He looked at the titles, his golden eyes moving across the screen. There were hundreds of books listed. Military. Word spread through the Valor's Edge like wildfire. The human child was teaching the High Commander about warfare. Officers from all 4 allied species began finding excuses to visit the tactical room. They wanted to see for themselves if the stories were true. By the 3rd day of Sophie's visit, the tactical room had become something like a classroom. Sophie sat at the center, surrounded by alien officers who took notes on their own devices. She showed them battle after battle from Earth's history, explaining tactics that seemed obvious to her but were completely revolutionary to them. A Velcon officer named Drathix was particularly interested. The Velcons were shorter than Crithians, with blue-green skin and 3 eyes arranged in a triangle on their faces. They were known throughout the Alliance as the best defensive strategists. "Tell us about the Mountain Pass battle," Drathix requested, "the one from your European history." Sophie knew exactly which battle he meant. "You mean Thermopylae? That's a really famous one. About 2,500 years ago on Earth, a huge army from Persia invaded Greece. The Persian army had maybe 100,000 soldiers. The Greeks only had about 7,000. She pulled up a map on her tablet. The Greeks knew they couldn't win in an open battle. So they chose to fight here, at Thermopylae, which means hot gates. It was a narrow pass between the mountains and the sea, only about 50 feet wide at the narrowest point. The holographic display showed the terrain. The officers leaned in to study it. The Greeks put their best warriors, 300 Spartans, at the front. The narrow pass meant the Persians couldn't use their superior numbers. They could only attack with a few soldiers at a time. The Spartans held the pass for 3 days, killing thousands of Persian soldiers. "That is excellent defensive strategy," Drathix said proudly.
Using terrain to neutralize superior numbers.
"This is what Velcons teach in our academies." "But they lost," Sophie said quietly. Drathix's 3 eyes blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" "A Greek trader showed the Persians a secret path through the mountains. They went around the pass and attacked from behind. The Spartans all died. The Persians won." The room fell silent. Sophie continued, "That's the lesson. Even the best defensive position has a weakness. You have to know all the ways an enemy can reach you, not just the obvious ones. The Spartans knew about the path, but they didn't guard it well enough." Drathix looked troubled. "On Velcon, we have held our fortress cities for 500 years. We believe they are impregnable. Can I see maps of your fortresses?" Sophie asked innocently. Vexthor and Zarketh exchanged glances. Showing military installations to humans was not part of the original plan. But Zarketh nodded slowly. Drathix pulled up holographic maps of 3 major Velcon fortress cities. They were built into mountainsides with thick walls and defensive towers covering every approach. Supply tunnels ran deep underground, protected by multiple security checkpoints. Sophie studied them for several minutes, tilting her head and zooming in on different sections. The officers waited nervously. "These are really good fortresses," Sophie finally said. "Much better than anything humans built in ancient times. But I see some problems." "Problems?" Drathix sounded offended. "The supply tunnels. They're your weak point. You have security checkpoints, but what if an enemy got past them? Once they're in the tunnels, they have direct access to the fortress. And look here. The tunnels all connect to the same underground water source. If someone poisoned the water, or put something in the air circulation system, the whole fortress would be in trouble." She zoomed in on another section. "Also, your defensive towers are positioned to cover attacks from ground level. But what about attacks from above? If an enemy had aircraft or dropped soldiers from orbit, they could land on top of the fortress where your weapons can't reach them." Drathix's skin color changed to a darker shade of blue. In Velcon physiology, this indicated distress. "No one has ever attacked us from above. The idea is absurd." "Why?" Sophie asked. "You have spacecraft. Other species have spacecraft. Why wouldn't they use them?" There was no good answer to that question. The Velcons had simply never considered aerial assault because their enemies had always attacked from the ground using traditional methods. Zarketh spoke up. "Sophie, you have identified potential vulnerabilities in military systems that have protected entire civilizations for centuries. How is it that humans can see these weaknesses so easily?" Sophie thought about it. "I think it's because humans have tried everything. Every type of warfare. Every type of attack and defense. We've fought on land, sea, air, and now in space. We've used swords, arrows, guns, bombs, chemicals, and biological weapons. We've besieged cities, fought in jungles, deserts, mountains, and Arctic ice. Every time we thought we had perfect defenses, someone figured out how to defeat them. So we learned that nothing is really perfect. There's always a weakness." An officer from the Myric species spoke up. "The Myrics looked like tall, thin mantises with crystalline skin. Our people have avoided war for 800 years through diplomacy and isolation. We hide our homeworld's location and maintain secret trade routes. No one can attack what they cannot find." Sophie nodded. That's smart. But what if someone followed one of your trade ships back to your home? Or what if someone captured a Myrick ship and forced the crew to tell them the location? We have protocols. Our crews would rather die than reveal our secrets. What if the enemy didn't ask them? What if they just tracked the ship's navigation computer? Or analyzed the engine residue to figure out which direction you came from? Or used mathematics to calculate possible homeworld locations based on travel times and fuel consumption? The Myrick's officer's crystalline skin seemed to dim. These methods have not been used against us. Yet, Sophie said simply. More officers wanted to present their defensive strategies and battle doctrines. Each time, Sophie found flaws that no one had considered. She wasn't trying to be mean or show off. She genuinely thought she was helping them improve their tactics. During a break, Nixara sat down next to Sophie. You must understand, child. You are frightening us, Sophie looked confused. I don't want to frighten anyone. I just like talking about strategy. I know, but consider what you have done. In 3 days, you have identified critical vulnerabilities in military systems that have existed for centuries. Systems designed by our best strategic minds tested in real conflicts, and you found their weaknesses just by looking at them. But these weaknesses seem obvious, Sophie protested. To you, only to you, and that is what frightens us. Nixara's voice was gentle. On your world, warfare has been constant. Millions have died learning these lessons. Every weakness has been exploited, every defense overcome, every strategy countered. Your entire civilization has been shaped by conflict. Sophie felt a sudden weight in her chest. Is that bad? Are humans bad because we fight so much?
No, child, not bad.
Just different. Dangerous perhaps, but not evil. Nixara gestured around the room. We have had peace for so long that we forgot how to truly think about war. You are reminding us, teaching us, and we are grateful, even as we are afraid. Peter Blake arrived to take Sophie to dinner. As they walked through the corridors, Sophie was quiet. What's wrong, honey? Peter asked. Dad, are humans scary to the aliens? Peter stopped walking and knelt down to look at his daughter. Did someone say something to you? No, everyone has been really nice. But I've been thinking. We've had so many wars on Earth. So many people died. The aliens haven't had as many wars. Is that why they think differently about fighting? Peter sighed. Yes, Sophie. That's exactly right. Humanity has a long, violent history. We've learned hard lessons that other species haven't had to learn. That makes us valuable as allies, but it also makes us intimidating. I don't want to scare them. I just wanted to help, I know. And you are helping. High Commander Zarketh told me that you've given them new perspectives on military strategy that could save countless lives if they're ever attacked by a hostile force. You're doing something important. Sophie hugged her father. Can I keep teaching them? As long as you want to. That evening, Zarketh called an emergency meeting of his senior staff. The tactical room was sealed, and only the highest-ranking officers from each species were present. We need to discuss the implications of what we have learned, Zarketh began. This human child has more tactical knowledge than our military academies teach in 10 years of study. She learned it casually, as part of her normal education. What does this tell us about humanity? Vexthor spoke first. It tells us they are a warrior species, perhaps the most dangerous warrior species in the galaxy. Not just warriors, Drathix corrected. Warriors learn to fight. Humans learn to think about fighting. There is a difference. They analyze, adapt, and innovate. Every defeat teaches them. Every victory is studied for weaknesses. The Myrick's officer added, they have military historians, professional scholars whose only job is to study past conflicts. The child mentioned this casually as if it were normal. Who else does this? No one, Zarketh said flatly. No other species we know of has dedicated so much cultural effort to understanding warfare. Most civilizations fight when necessary, then try to forget the horror of it. Humans remember. On the 4th day, Zarketh decided to conduct an experiment. He had discussed it with Ambassador Blake the night before, and Peter had given his permission, though he looked worried. Now the High Commander stood before Sophie in the tactical room, with dozens of officers watching. Sophie, I have a proposal for you, Zarketh said. Would you like to play a game? Sophie's eyes lit up. What kind of game? A war game? A simulation. You would command a human fleet and my best officers would command a Crithian fleet. The forces would be equal in number and technology. The scenario would be a battle for control of a star system. Whoever achieves their objectives wins. Sophie bounced excitedly on her feet. That sounds amazing. I love strategy games. My dad and I play them all the time on our computers at home. Zarketh felt a chill at how casually she said this. Human children played war games for fun. Excellent. Let me explain the rules. The holographic display expanded to fill half the tactical room. It showed a star system with 2 habitable planets, several asteroid belts, a gas giant, and various stations. Blue markers represented the human fleet. Red markers represented the Crythian fleet. Your objective is to capture the orbital station above the second planet, Zarketh explained. Our objective is to defend it. You command 40 ships of various types. We command 40 ships. The simulation runs at accelerated time. 1 minute here equals 1 hour in the simulation. Do I get to see what kinds of ships I have? Sophie asked. Yes, here. Zarketh pulled up the ship roster. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, fighters, and support vessels. Sophie studied the information carefully, reading about weapons, shields, speed, and cargo capacity. Okay, I'm ready, she said after a few minutes. Zarketh took his position at the command station. He had chosen 5 of his best tactical officers to assist him. They had decades of experience between them. They had studied the scenario for hours and developed a solid defensive strategy. Begin simulation, Zarketh ordered. The Red Crythian fleet immediately moved into a defensive formation around the orbital station, exactly as they had planned. It was a textbook defense with overlapping fields of fire and backup positions ready. The blue human fleet did something no one expected. It split apart. Sophie divided her 40 ships into 8 small groups, each moving in a different direction. Some headed toward the asteroid belt, others curved around toward the gas giant. A few stayed near the edge of the system. Only one small group moved toward the station. What is she doing? One officer whispered. She is dividing her forces, Vexthor observed. That makes no sense. We can destroy her small groups one at a time. But Zarketh felt uneasy. He remembered what Sophie had taught them about misdirection and deception. Do not pursue. Hold the defensive position. Wait to see what she does. For several minutes of real time, representing several hours in the simulation, nothing much happened. Sophie's small groups moved around the system, seemingly without purpose. The Crythian defense remained solid around the station. Then Sophie struck. One of her groups hiding in the asteroid belt launched missiles, not at the Crythian fleet, but at the asteroids themselves. The explosion sent large rocks hurtling toward the station. The Crythian fleet had to adjust their position to avoid the asteroids. At the same moment, another of Sophie's groups emerged from behind the gas giant, using the planet's gravity to slingshot themselves at high speed toward the station. They approached from an angle the Crythians had left less defended because they hadn't expected anyone to use that route. Intercept that group, Zarketh ordered. His fleet moved to block them, but this left gaps in the defensive formation. Sophie's other groups all attacked at once, from 6 different directions. The Crythian fleet was suddenly facing threats from every angle. They tried to maintain their defensive formation, but it was breaking apart under the pressure. She is using the terrain, Drathik said with admiration and horror. The asteroids, the planet's gravity, even the star's radiation, everything is a weapon to her. Sophie's small groups didn't try to win direct confrontations. When the Crythians concentrated forces against one group, that group would retreat while another group attacked from a different direction. It was like trying to fight smoke. The Crythians couldn't pin down any single target. Worse, Sophie's groups were targeting specific ships. She went after the Crythian supply vessels and command ships first, ignoring the heavily armed battleships. By the time Zarketh realized her strategy, he had lost half his supply chain and 2 command vessels. Regroup around the station, he ordered. Tight formation. Protect the vital ships. But Sophie had anticipated this. While the Crythian fleet pulled back to defend, 3 of her groups captured the mining facilities in the asteroid belt. Another group secured the fuel refineries near the gas giant. Sophie now controlled the system's resources. She is not trying to win a battle, Nixara said in wonder. She is trying to win a war. Resources matter more than ships. Sophie's next move was even more cunning. She sent 1 damaged destroyer on a direct course toward the station, broadcasting a surrender signal. The Crythians had to decide whether to let it approach or destroy it. It could be a trick, Vexthor warned. A bomb ship. But if we destroy a surrendering vessel, that violates the rules of honorable warfare, another officer argued. While they debated, Sophie's other ships closed in from multiple directions. By the time the Crithians decided to destroy the surrendering ship, it was too late. Sophie's forces hit the station from 6 sides simultaneously. The Crithians fought hard, but they were outmaneuvered. Sophie had them reacting instead of acting. Every time they moved to counter one threat, 2 more appeared. She used damaged ships as decoys, sent empty transports on fake supply runs to waste Crithian missiles, and even crashed a destroyer into an asteroid to create a debris field that blocked Crithian sensors. After 2 hours of real time, representing 2 days in the simulation, it was over. Sophie's forces controlled the station. The Crithian fleet was down to 12 ships, scattered and out of supplies. Sophie still had 27 ships, damaged but functional. Simulation complete, the computer announced. Human fleet victory. The tactical room was silent. Zarketh stared at the display, trying to understand what had happened. He and his officers had done everything right according to Crithian military doctrine. They had maintained formation, protected key assets, and fought with honor. And they had lost badly. Sophie was looking at the display with concern. Did I do something wrong? You all look upset. No, child, Zarketh said slowly. You did everything right. Too right. Tell me, where did you learn to fight like this? Sophie thought about it. Well, the part about splitting into small groups is from guerrilla warfare. That's when a small force fights a big force by never fighting fair. Hit-and-run tactics. My grandpa told me about it. And using the asteroids as weapons, that's from a book I read about creative problem-solving in battle. And targeting your supply ships first, that's from submarine warfare in World War II. And the fake surrender, that's from pirates and raiders throughout history. She paused. Was it bad that I did the fake surrender? Some people think that's dishonorable. It was effective, Vexthor said quietly. Devastating, Nixara added. An older Crethian officer stood up, his 4 arms crossed. High Commander, with respect, this was not a fair test. The child used underhanded tactics, deception, tricks. In a real battle between honorable forces, such methods would be considered disgraceful. Sophie looked down, feeling bad, but Zarketh held up one hand. Commander Tarvex, you are correct that these tactics violate our sense of honor. But answer me this. If we were truly fighting for our lives, for the survival of our civilization, would honor matter more than victory? Tarvex started to answer, then stopped. He slowly sat back down. The child has shown us something crucial, Zarketh continued. We have been fighting according to rules that our enemies might not follow. We have assumed that warfare follows certain patterns because that is how we have always fought. But humans do not fight this way. They use everything available. They turn the environment into a weapon. They deceive, misdirect, and strike where you are weakest. He looked at Sophie, and she learned all of this from books and games. This is normal to her, natural. Peter Blake had been watching from the back of the room. Now he stepped forward. High Commander, if I may speak. Please, Ambassador. My daughter is 10 years old. She plays strategy games because she thinks they're fun. But what you need to understand is that Earth has companies that make these games professionally. Military organizations use them for training. We have competitions where thousands of people compete to see who has the best strategy. We have people who study game theory, which is the mathematics of strategy and decision-making. He put his hand on Sophie's shoulder. Sophie is a normal, bright child. But she grew up in a civilization that has refined warfare to an art and a science. Every human military officer studies history like Sophie does, except in much more detail. They train with simulations far more complex than the one you just ran. They learn from thousands of battles across thousands of years. Tarvex looked pale. Ambassador, are you saying that your actual military forces are even more capable than your child? Yes, considerably more. The room erupted in conversation. The Crithian High Council convened via holographic communication. Representatives from all 4 allied species appeared as life-sized projections in the council chamber aboard the Valor's Edge. Each of them had reviewed the reports. Each of them had watched recordings of Sophie's tactical demonstrations, and each of them had very strong opinions. Counselor Vrendak spoke first. She was an elder Crithian, over 200 years old, with skin like weathered granite. I have read Commander Zarketh's reports with great concern. This human child has exposed critical vulnerabilities in our military doctrine. But that is not what troubles me most. What troubles me is that she did it casually, as if these observations were obvious. Because to her they are obvious, said Counselor Morteth, a Velcon representative. My people have relied on fortress defense for 5 centuries. In one afternoon, a 10-year-old human showed us how easily those fortresses could fall. We are now redesigning our entire defensive strategy. The economic cost alone is staggering. A Myrix counselor, whose name translated as Keeper of Silent Waters, spoke in their musical voice. The question before us is clear. Is humanity a threat we must prepare for, or an ally we must secure? Both, Admiral Torvak said bluntly. He commanded the Crethean Imperial Fleet. They are clearly a warrior species. Their entire civilization is built on conflict. Even their children are trained in tactics and strategy. We must assume their military forces are extremely capable. But their technology is primitive, another counselor argued. They have only just achieved faster-than-light travel. Their ships are slow. Their weapons are weak by our standards. For now, Zarketh said. He had been allowed to join the council meeting to present his findings. But consider this. Humans have gone from wooden sailing ships to space travel in roughly 500 years. Their technological progress is exponential. Give them our technology, and they will understand it, improve it, and innovate beyond it within a generation. That is speculation, Vrendak pointed out. Is it? Ambassador Blake told me that when humans developed nuclear weapons, they went from first successful test to deploying hundreds of them in less than 10 years. When they developed computers, they went from room-sized machines to devices small enough to hold in your hand in 50 years. They do not develop technology slowly. They rush forward, learning and adapting at incredible speed. Peter Blake had also been invited to the council meeting. He sat quietly, listening, knowing that the fate of human-alien relations depended on what was decided here. Ambassador Blake, Vrendak addressed him directly. Please understand our position. In 1 week, your daughter has fundamentally changed how we think about warfare. She has revealed weaknesses we did not know existed. She has demonstrated tactical thinking that surpasses our best military minds. And you tell us she is average for a human child. Can you understand why this makes us nervous? Peter stood up. Counselor, I understand completely. If I were in your position, I would be nervous too. But let me offer a different perspective. Yes, humanity has a violent history. Yes, we have fought countless wars. Yes, we have refined warfare to a degree that other species apparently have not. But do you know what else we have learned from all that conflict? He paused, looking at each counselor in turn. We have learned the cost of war. We have learned that war destroys everything it touches. We have learned that making enemies is easy, but making peace is hard. And we have learned that we survive not through strength alone, but through cooperation. Humanity has many nations on your one world, Keeper of Silent Waters observed. Do these nations fight each other? Not anymore. Not for nearly a century. We fought 2 massive world wars that killed over 100 million people total. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet. And then we looked at what we had done and decided that we needed to change. We formed alliances. We created international laws. We built institutions to prevent war before it starts. Peter's voice was passionate now. Yes, we know how to fight. But we also know why we shouldn't fight. Every memorial on Earth, every history book, every lesson we teach our children about war includes the message that peace is always better than conflict. Sophie knows about military tactics because we teach our history honestly, but she also knows that every battle she studies represents real people who died, real families that were destroyed. Pretty words, Admiral Torvak said skeptically, but actions matter more. What guarantee do we have that humanity will not become aggressive once you have more advanced technology? The same guarantee you have about yourselves, Peter replied. None. You have to trust that we mean what we say, that we seek allies, not enemies, that we offer our knowledge in exchange for yours so both of us can be stronger. Zarketh spoke up. Counselors, may I make a recommendation? We have 2 choices. We can treat humanity as a potential threat, keep our distance, share nothing, and hope they never become powerful enough to challenge us. Or we can embrace them as partners, share our technology, learn from their strategic knowledge, and build an alliance that benefits both civilizations. If we choose the first option, we make them suspicious of us. We potentially create the very enemy we fear. If we choose the second option, we gain access to 10,000 years of military knowledge and strategic thinking. We also gain allies who know how to fight against any threat we might face. You are asking us to arm a potential enemy, Frendak said. No. I am asking us to strengthen a potential friend. Zarketh pulled up the simulation recording of Sophie's victory. Watch this again. See how she thinks. Now imagine if hostile forces ever threaten our empire. Do you want this kind of thinking working against us or for us? The council chamber fell silent as they watched the simulation play out again. Sophie's tactics were no less impressive the second time. The way she used everything as a weapon, the way she anticipated and countered every defensive move, the way she won through innovation rather than brute force. Counselor Morteth spoke slowly. If we ally with humanity, we change the balance of power in this region of space. Other civilizations will notice. Yes, Zarketh agreed. They will notice that the Krithian Empire has allied with a warrior species. They will think twice before threatening us. Is that not a benefit? Or they will see us as a threat and unite against us, another counselor argued. They could do that already, Admiral Torvax pointed out. Our empire is the strongest force in this sector. Others fear us now. Adding human strategic expertise to our military might does not change the political situation significantly. But it does make us much harder to defeat if anyone is foolish enough to try. Keeper of Silent Waters made us sound like wind chimes. I have been listening to the debate, and I keep returning to one point. The child. Everything we are discussing stems from what a 10-year-old human child knows. Ambassador Blake, you have other children on your world? Billions of them, Peter said. And they all receive similar education to your daughter? Basic education, yes. Some children know more about history than Sophie. Some know less, but all of them learn about human history, including our wars. Billions of children all learning to think about strategy and conflict. Keeper of Silent Waters sounded amazed. You are raising entire generations of tactical thinkers. We are raising generations who understand their own history, Peter corrected gently. Most of them will never serve in the military. Most will become doctors, teachers, engineers, artists, farmers. But yes, they all learn about where we came from, including the dark parts of our history. Rendak spoke again. I will be honest, Ambassador. Many on this council are afraid of your species, not because of your current military strength, but because of your potential. A species that has spent 10,000 years learning how to fight, that teaches its children about warfare as casually as we teach mathematics, that treats strategy and tactics as entertainment. That species, given access to our technology, could become unstoppable. Then stop us before we become a threat, Peter said quietly. The room went silent. If you truly believe humanity is a danger to the galaxy, you should act now. Quarantine our system. Prevent us from expanding. Use your superior technology to keep us contained. You are suggesting we imprison your entire species? Mordeth sounded shocked. I am pointing out that you have the power to do so. If you believe we are that dangerous, you have a responsibility to protect the galaxy from us. Peter met Vrendak's gaze. But if you do that, you will be proving that the strong can oppress the weak simply out of fear. You will be choosing violence over trust, and you will never know what humanity might have contributed to the galaxy as your friends. He continued. Alternatively, you can take a chance on us. Share your technology. Let us share our knowledge. Build something together that is stronger than either of us alone. Yes, there is risk. There is always risk. But there is also opportunity. Zarketh added. The ambassador is correct. We face a choice between fear and hope, between isolation and cooperation. I have spent a week with humans. I have watched the child interact with our officers. She is curious, enthusiastic, and genuinely wants to help. Her father is a skilled diplomat who seeks common ground. I believe their intentions are sincere. Belief is not certainty, Admiral Torvax said. 6 months had passed since Sophie Blake first stepped aboard the Valor's Edge. In that time, the galaxy had indeed changed. Though not everyone realized how much. The formal alliance treaty between humanity and the Krithian Empire had been signed with great ceremony. Human engineers were now working alongside Krithian scientists, learning about antimatter reactors and advanced propulsion systems. In return, Krithian officers attended newly established courses at human military academies, where they learned about everything from ancient siege warfare to modern special operations tactics. But the most significant change was happening quietly, in tactics rooms and strategy centers across the Krithian Empire. Wherever the recordings of Sophie's lessons had spread, military doctrine was being rewritten. Officers who had spent decades memorizing traditional formations were now studying human concepts like asymmetric warfare, combined arms tactics, and maneuver warfare. Sophie herself had become something of a celebrity. Though she did not quite understand why, she continued to visit the Valor's Edge regularly, teaching officers about human military history while learning about Crithian, Velcon, and Myrix battles. She had even started writing a book comparing human and alien approaches to warfare, with help from Nixara. On this particular day, Sophie was back aboard the Valor's Edge for a special presentation. High Commander Zarketh had asked her to attend a briefing, though he had been mysterious about the details. The briefing room was packed with officers from all 4 allied species. Sophie recognized many of them from her previous visits. They all seemed excited about something. "Thank you for coming, Sophie," Zarketh began. "Today I want to show you what your lessons have accomplished. Over the past 6 months, we have completely revised our military training programs based on concepts you taught us. We have run hundreds of simulations comparing our old tactics to our new tactics. The results are remarkable. A holographic display showed 2 fleets facing each other. This simulation uses our old defensive doctrine against a hypothetical enemy fleet," Zarketh explained. "Watch what happens." The simulation played out. The Crithian fleet formed their traditional defensive sphere. The enemy attacked. The battle was long and costly, but the Crithians eventually won, losing about 40% of their ships in the process. "Now watch the same scenario, but using tactics inspired by your teachings," Zarketh said. The simulation reset. This time, the Crithian fleet split into smaller, more mobile groups. They used the terrain, set ambushes, and attacked the enemy supply lines. The battle ended much more quickly, with the Crithians losing only 15% of their ships. The officers in the room applauded. Sophie felt her face get warm with embarrassment. "It is not just simulations," Vexthor added. "We recently had a real test. A pirate fleet attacked one of our merchant convoys. The escort commander had attended your lessons on irregular warfare. He used tactics he learned from your descriptions of naval convoy battles in Earth's World War II. He defeated a force twice his size, losing only 1 ship instead of the 4 or 5 we would have expected using old tactics." "That's wonderful," Sophie said. "But I just told you about history. You are the ones who figured out how to use it." "You gave us the knowledge," Drathik said. "We simply applied it. But knowledge is the foundation. Without your teachings, we would still be fighting the same way we have fought for centuries." Zarketh continued. "There is another reason I asked you here today. The Crithian High Council has decided to establish a new military institution, the Academy of Strategic Studies. It will be dedicated to studying warfare in all its forms, from all civilizations throughout history. We want to do what humans do, learn from the past to prepare for the future." He paused. "And we would like to offer you a position as a founding instructor at this academy. You would teach about human military history and strategic thinking. You would help train the next generation of Crithian officers." Sophie's eyes went wide. "But I'm only 10 years old. Well, almost 11 now. I'm not a teacher. Not a real one." "You are more qualified than anyone else we know," Nixara said gently. "You have already taught dozens of officers. You have changed how we think about warfare. Age is not as important as knowledge and the ability to share it." "What do you say, Sophie?" Zarketh asked. Sophie looked at her father, who had been standing quietly in the back of the room. Peter smiled and nodded. It was her decision. "I would need to talk to my parents and make sure it's okay," Sophie said carefully. "And I would still need to do my regular schoolwork. And I'm not sure I know enough to be a real teacher." "You know more than you think," Vexthor assured her. "And you would not be alone. We would have other instructors, including human military historians that we have invited to join the academy. You would be part of a team." "Then yes," Sophie said. "I would like to help." "It sounds fun." The officers applauded again. Sophie felt strange. She had come on this trip just wanting to see aliens and spaceships. She never expected to end up teaching them about history, or helping them change their military tactics. Sometimes life surprised you in the best ways. After the meeting ended, Sophie walked with her father and Zarketh to the observation deck. Earth was visible in the distance, a blue and white marble against the black of space. "Commander Zarketh, can I ask you something?" Sophie said. "Of course." "That first day when I started asking questions about the Battle of the Crimson Nebula, you all seemed upset. Were you really scared of humans?" Zarketh was quiet for a moment. Yes, Sophie. We were scared. And to be honest, some of us still are. Not because we think humans are evil, but because we realize how dangerous you could be if you wanted to be. Because we know how to fight? Because you know how to think about fighting. There is a difference. Many species can fight, but humans have made a science of it. You study it, analyze it, and learn from it in ways no other species we have encountered does. That makes you unpredictable and extremely dangerous. Sophie thought about this. Is that why you wanted to be our friends? Because you were scared? Partly, Zarketh admitted, but also because we recognized an opportunity. Yes, humans are dangerous, but humans are also creative, adaptable, and innovative. Those same qualities that make you good at warfare also make you good at science, art, and exploration. We wanted to learn from you, not just about military tactics, but about how you approach problems. And we wanted you to learn from us, Peter added. Humans have a lot of knowledge about warfare, but we lack experience in space. We lack the technology you have. Together we can accomplish more than either of us could alone. That is the foundation of any good alliance, Zarketh said. Mutual benefit and mutual respect. Sophie looked at Earth, thinking about all the people down there who did not yet know how much things had changed. Do you think other humans will be scared when they find out about the alliance? Some people on Earth don't trust aliens yet. Some will be scared, Peter said honestly. Change is always frightening. But most will see the opportunity, just like the Crithians did. We get access to technology that will improve life for everyone. Better energy sources, better medical technology, better transportation, and in exchange we share our knowledge and our perspective. And our military expertise, Sophie added. Yes, that too. Peter put his hand on Sophie's shoulder. Sophie, I want you to understand something important. What you did here, teaching the Crithians about human military history, was necessary and valuable. But I hope that humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy will not be teaching others how to fight. I hope it will be teaching them about art, music, literature, science, and all the other things humans have created. War and peace are two sides of the same coin, Zarketh observed. A civilization that truly understands war is more likely to choose peace because they know the cost. Sophie has taught us to be better warriors, but in doing so she has also taught us to be more careful about when we choose to fight. That's what Grandpa always said, Sophie agreed. He said the best soldiers are the ones who have seen war and know how terrible it is. They don't want to fight unless they have to. The three of them stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching Earth slowly rotate below them. Finally, Zarketh spoke again. I have been thinking about something, Sophie. When you first arrived, you asked about our battles, and I thought you were just a curious child. I did not realize you were evaluating our tactics. I did not realize that every question you asked was revealing weaknesses in our strategies. He turned to look at her. Were you doing that on purpose? Were you analyzing our military capabilities from the beginning? Sophie looked surprised. No, I was just curious. I wanted to understand how you fought. I didn't mean to find problems. I just noticed them because they seemed obvious to me. Zarketh made that sound that might have been laughter. That makes it even more remarkable. You were not trying to expose our vulnerabilities. You simply could not help but see them because of how your mind works. Humans look at warfare and automatically see patterns, weaknesses, and opportunities. It is instinctive for you. Is that bad? Sophie asked worriedly. No, child. It is simply who you are, and it is why humanity will be a force to be reckoned with in the galaxy. Not because you are aggressive or